Okay, everybody, welcome here once again to St. Paul's Church National Historic Site, Mount Vernon, New York, and our weekly series, History from St. Paul's. Today we're actually in historic St. Paul's Church, talking about the interesting story, history, and commemoration behind this small wooden model, very well constructed, of the church in 1865. It is the last year of the Civil War, of course. That is just a coincidence. It was made to commemorate a couple of important anniversaries that overlapped in the same year in 1865 for this church, this historic edifice. It was the 60th anniversary of the consecration of St. Paul's. The parish goes back to the 18th century, but it's not consecrated as an Episcopal church till 1805. So there's your 60th anniversary. More importantly, it's the 100th anniversary, the centennial of the beginning of the construction of this edifice. If you ever visit us for the outdoor self-guided tours, look right over the keystone over the door on the western side. You still see in the sandstone block there 1765. So it's the centennial of the church. Many people did something special. The minister, Father Coffey, gave a landmark address, which is in archive form, is still one of our best sources on the early history of the church. Fairs were held, special things were done by parishioners. Luckily for us, in this case, a 46-year-old German immigrant, Joseph Major, who lived in the area and in all likelihood was a parishioner and was a carpenter by trade, because you could see the fine skill that went into constructing this, made this model. That was his contribution to the centennial of the parish. And a model like this, it is frozen in time. It really shows you what the church looked like in 1865, exterior. We do still see he's representing the wood shingle roof, which went back to the 18th century. Some repairs along the way, but when Joseph made his model in 1865, they still had a wooden roof, which would have been common back in the 18th century, right up here through the Civil War. But this is, by 1870, they moved to slate, and then going forward with the history of roofing. But you're still seeing the fairly simple wooden roof. Over here on the side, the eastern wing of the church, that had been added in 1855, but he's showing it. This is the original piece of the church, 1855, a wealthier, larger parish, pushes out and adds that eastern extension, which at the time was still used for community purposes, not really part of the sanctuary yet. Most interestingly is the top. He's showing a steeple and a cupola that's basically no longer there. And it tells us something about the role of the church and the religious history of the parishioners to look at something like this. You see a very open, airy wooden cupola, which is what they had, back into the 18th century, still there at the time of the Civil War. The bell is so important, where before the telephone, let alone all the modern, communication devices we take for granted, and the church bell, at a time when most people still lived pretty close to the church, it is the source of communication. Warnings and news are chimed out by the bell. You don't want something that's contained the sound. You want a minimal cupola or steeple, in this case just a couple of wooden posts. The sound can carry as far as possible. Fires, funerals, various events are communicated with gongs and chimes through some kind of code that most people would have understood. Also at the top, we still see a weathercock. They're still in that tradition. This is almost the end of it, where most people around here are farmers. And the weather reports are minimal in those days. You got an almanac and maybe a daily paper from New York City, but the highest point in the community, farmers who live in the area, you can see the steeple, want to see direction and velocity of the wind. So you still have the weathercock on top of the church. Also, their religious heritage at the time, it's a Protestant church, and maybe left over from the Protestant Reformation, there still is an uncomfortability among a lot of Protestant churches on displaying the Christian cross. That was seen as something that you'd seen on a Catholic church, and Protestant churches still eschewed that and shied away from it. So you do have that double function there. Tells you something about their religious heritage. It also tells you something about the community, that the weathercock was still so important, because most people living around here are still farmers. They live pretty close to the church. Where's that wind? Am I going to plant my seed that day? What's its direction? What's coming up in the weather? That was your source of information. This all comes down, by the way, so 1887, 22 years later, a wealthier parish, has taken this, probably by then aging, weathered, they didn't have a lightning rod, so maybe it's charred. The remnant of this wooden cupola is coming down in 1887. We have pictures of lots of scaffolding up the church, and you could see they're erecting what you see today. So if you come visit us for the outdoor self-guided tours, you don't see this anymore. You now see the masonry steeple, a Victorian steeple that's put on in 1887. By then we have the telephone and the idea that the church bell has to be heard. People are moving away from the church, other sources of communication. It's probably not serving the purpose that it did back to colonial times. So the idea that you could contain the sound a little more with a stone and brick steeple rather than this very open wooden cupola has resonated and made a lot of sense to people. So you no longer see this. And then by then, also in 1887, when they rebuild, the industrial commercial character of the area as the economic pulse is becoming manifest. I'm not saying there's no farmers, but there's far fewer as time goes on. An older tradition that you necessarily needed the weathercock has started to fade. And also by then, religiously, they have moved on or changed their ideas. It's usually called the Oxford movement or Anglo-Catholicism coming over from England, where Episcopal churches and other Protestant churches are losing that leeriness of the cross and seeing it is part of their religious heritage. It's not really just for the Catholic Church. So since they rebuild anyway in 1887, since the agricultural farming character of the community is fading and you no longer need the weathercock, and now they have reconceptualized what the cross means, you do see the cross for the first time. So by 1887, you have a stone and brick steeple containing the sound, which by then does have what you'd see today, which is the traditional, the Christian symbol of the cross. Hope you found this interesting, everybody. Please tune in again next week for another edition of History from St. Paul's.